In the tapestry of life, where every thread holds a story, America in Black and White emerges as a haven for the voices echoing through the heart of our communities. In this podcast, we wade through the rivers of our collective experiences, celebrating the vibrant hues of change brought forth by the whispers of hope and the roars of action. It's more than just a conversation. It's a journey into the heart of our society, illuminated by the light of those daring to dream and do. Join us, and let your voice be the melody that guides us toward a dawn where every color finds its place in the masterpiece of our shared destiny. Together, let's paint a future brimming with the positives that dwell in our minds and the actions that shape our world.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another episode of America in Black and White. Tonight, I'd like to start the show where I will do a Black history reflection before we introduce our guests. Our reflection tonight is on Thurgood Marshall. Thurgood Marshall's legacy is a reminder that justice is not an abstract ideal, it is a lived experience shaped by courage, intellect, and relentless advocacy. Before he became the first Black Supreme Court justice, Marshall was a strategist, a litigator, and a visionary who understood that the law could be both a weapon and a shield. His work with the NAACP Legal Defense Fund dismantled the legal architecture of segregation, culminating in Brown v. Board of Education, a decision that redefined the moral compass of this nation. Marshall believed deeply in the transformative power of education, not simply as a pathway to opportunity, but as a fundamental right tied to dignity and citizenship. Tonight, as we welcome Dr. Deshaun C. Washington, we honor Marshall's blueprint using knowledge as liberation, policy as empowerment, and education as the cornerstone of a just society. Dr. Dr. Washington's work stands firmly in that lineage as a continuation of Marshall's insistence that every child deserves access, equity, and the tools to shape their own destiny. Thank you for that, ladies and gentlemen. And now I'd like to introduce our wonderful guests. So, again, good evening, family. Welcome to another powerful episode of America in Black and White, where truth meets testimony and where our stories are not just told, they are honored. Tonight, we explore the intersection of education, justice, and community transformation. We live in a time when public education is under pressure, teachers are stretched thin, and opportunity gaps continue to widen. Yet, in the midst of these challenges, there are leaders who refuse to let our system define our children's futures, leaders who innovate, advocate, and elevate. Our guest tonight is one of those leaders. Dr. Deshaun C. Washington is not just an educator, he is a movement. A 2024 Massachusetts Teacher of the Year, a two-time TEDx speaker, a scholar, a curriculum developer, a public education advocate, and a builder of pathways that empower students to thrive academically, socially, and civically. Tonight, we dive into his journey, his purpose, and the work he is doing to cultivate change makers across the nation. Let's get into it. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Deshaun Washington. Hello,
Hey,
sir.
Brother King, how you doing tonight, man?
I am doing just excellent. I know it's been like 6+ months when we scheduled this wonderful show, and I'm really glad that you're here. Is there anything you'd like to say to our audience before we get into the show?
Well, when you introduced tonight's Black History icon that we could focus on, it really brought me full circle because a lot of people don't know this. So I think it's good to share it. My first Black History project in elementary school was of the Honorable Thurgood Marshall. And I had a chance to study him in great depths. And one of the things I studied about was his time at Harvard University and his training that he had under Charles Hamilton Houston and learning the law and understanding the law and putting it into action. And he was a scholar by nature, and applied so much of his knowledge into practical application. And I think, in this full circle moment, I think tonight is like a perfect opportunity for us to examine the practical application behind all of the theory, all the things that we learn about. But how do we put that into practice to ensure that our kids and our people are getting the best opportunities for learning, the best opportunities for engagement to make impact in society? And so I'm grateful for tonight, Brother King, because the Honorable Thurgood Marshall was just one of my favorite historical figures growing up, and just to hear that tonight is rejuvenating.
Well, what I like to do is, as we get the show started, what I like to do is I like to go through it, get an opportunity to where I have our audience get the opportunity to learn a little bit more about you, the man that you were before you got to this point. So, can you tell us what early experiences shaped your love for education and learning?
Oh, for sure. This you talk about the fun stuff right here. So I would say my introduction to education started as early as 2 years old. My grandmother, who was an educator in Woburn Public Schools in Massachusetts, she was my first teacher. And every day I would be at her house, staying over. Every day she'll bring me over to the Boston Public Library. We'll take that little walk down Dudley Station all the way up to the Roxbury Public Library in Boston. And man, that's where we would do all of our amazing work. I'm talking about we would read books for hours on end. And, we would learn all these different concepts from nonfiction texts and from the stories like Big Red Clifford and Frog and Toad and all these books. And I remember how much grandma would showcase her expression. She would read with expression as she would go through the books, right? And, it made me really invested into the characters and make predictions about what the characters would do next. And I had so much fun learning from grandma how to read, and listening to her read out to me that it became one of my greatest joys, even to this day, is books and reading. So that was my earliest introduction was grandma's daily interaction with me centering around books. And I would say that at 2, 3 years old, she unlocked my brain to imaginate. What I think about imagination these days is the ability to create, to innovate, to be inspired to do something new for to make the world a better place. And I remember that. I remember just those books being able to be the creative opportunity for me to look at the world in a new way where it was so big yet such reachable because the power of the book was in my hand. And so I had this nice interaction of books is a connector for me, and also the books are also a element of opportunity for me. And grandma gave me that initial exposure to my imagination and creating and innovating something new. And it really just comes from just reading cool, awesome children's books. That's really how it all started. And that was my earliest introduction to education. And then it really just going on from there.
Mhm. So, who were the educators or mentors who first saw your potential?
Mm. Yeah, I would say that probably my fourth and fifth grade teacher, Mr. McLean, he was, at my elementary school. I went to Boston Public Schools. And, for my elementary years, Mr. McLean, he was someone that was he held me accountable to expand myself as a student. I would say that generally school was relatively easier for me, in large part because I already had a lot of the foundation skills of reading from a very young age. So engaging in school was not as hard as maybe for someone else. But at the cost of that was that I didn't always apply myself the best way. I kind of coasted. And I remember Mr. McLean, spent a lot of time with me to really emphasize the importance in fourth grade, fifth grade of get into that next level as a student where you're taking ownership of your learning. You're not a passive receiver of learning, but you're the active participant of learning. And having him for those 2 years and having a male teacher at that was such a unique experience for me. Up to that point, all my teachers were women up to that point. So having him as a male teacher, it made me start to see myself as a male myself. Oh, like teaching is also for men as well. Like I was so used to seeing women all the time. So like, oh, I didn't know men also did this work. So that was like my first exposure to that. And yeah, I think he was just someone who was very fair, kind, respectful. Also, like he'll hold you accountable. Hold you to a high level of responsibility, but came with guidance. And that was the first like educate I would say for me that elevated me to another level, shifted me from the earliest of education, passively receiving it, to now actively seeking out education and knowledge.
So, I'll tell you, all of the male educators that have been here on the show, I got to say, all of you guys are just doing it. And I am so proud to see that, because what it does is the impact may not be is very large, but because the number of you guys are so small that a lot of people really don't see it the way they should see it. Can
Mm-hmm.
you tell us, from having that male teacher in your early life, how did that impact your leadership in the classroom today?
Wow. Well, that's a really great question because there's different stages and levels to the impact it has led to me to being an educator today. So yeah, I had the Mr. McLean's, and I had the Mr. Forbes, and I had these other teachers throughout my K to 12 experience that kind of showcased what the final product was going to look like when it was all said and done. Then there's also this element of once you become a teacher, you have to learn how to be an effective teacher. So, I'll go through college, and I become educator. I graduated at UMass Boston. Shout out to the Beacons with elementary and special education licensure. And I start my first teaching job at one of the Boston public schools in Mattapan, another neighborhood in Boston. And I'll tell you, man, I struggled a lot. So much so that in the beginning months, like I was losing control of my class because I didn't know how to build relationships. I knew how to teach because I was taught in school how to teach. I was taught, how to look at curriculum. I was taught how to provide instruction for curriculum. I was taught how to, do the different strategies and all these different things well. I didn't understand relationships and routines and structures that's needed for effective teaching. So I didn't have those skills. They were very much underdeveloped. And the first few months, I was losing control of my first third grade class. I'm an elementary school teacher. I teach, third grade, fourth grade. Been doing that for a decade plus now. But in the beginning, I struggled significantly with that. And I had some Black male educators specifically. I was very lucky. I had three Black male principals at my school. And you don't get stuff like that. That's not a common phenomenon. That's something that's very rare. Those brothers helped and provided like a crash course in the midst of my first year when I had my class taken over because I could not manage the class. They gave me tools of how to develop things like morning meeting, morning greetings, activity games, scholar of the day, but then also how to elevate student voices, how to pull yourself back as a teacher to allow students to shine. And then how do you allow your voice to now be a facilitator of knowledge rather than the beholder of all knowledge that's from within? And these shifts and paradigms, like at a different level, now allow me to understand how the Mr. McLean's and the Mr. Forbes were so effective earlier in my career when I was a student. And now as a teacher, I got the practical application of that. So that's really what this work of teaching and learning is all about is you surround yourself or you're blessed to be around educators, predominantly for me, other Black men who are strong, who are supportive, but also who have the capacity to be able to teach you and elevate you up. So that way you can be effective in your own craft If I didn't have that, I probably wouldn't be sitting there talking to you right now and I'd probably be in a different field somewhere. But those brothers helped me to get to the next level. And yeah, I think go from ineffective to effective relatively quickly.
So, growing up, what does
Mhm.
school represent for you personally?
Just something that you did from 8 o'clock to 3 o'clock for the most part. Like I said to you earlier, school, and especially in the early years, was passive. I think even after Mr. McLean's fourth and fifth grade class, I fell back to those habits again in middle school. I was just passively skating by. Yeah, I'll get A's, yeah, I'll get B's, but I wasn't applying myself well enough. Like I think the environment in that fourth, fifth grade class helped me to go to another level, but it wasn't internalized. It was like extrinsic motivation that came from the environment that made me perform better. But once you remove me out of the environment, I didn't perform as well. I was still smart, still was reading all these different things, but they were routine. So I wasn't doing well necessarily. Like at that point of like a scholar, he's about to blow up, he's about to do his thing. I wasn't one of those cats. It wasn't until I got to high school I went to City on the Hill charter public school, the original one that's over at 58 Circuit Street in Roxbury, Mass. It's now closed now, but when I went City on the Hill charter school, that was the prize charter school that you wanted to be at because you knew 100% of the students was graduating from high school going into college. You also knew that they were going to have high level success rate in MCAS, which is like the state assessment, and you knew kids were going to walk out of there much more profound scholars. And there was a lot of undeveloped skills I didn't have that helped me to become like more effective and more um, domineering, I think, as a student in my high school years. I didn't have strong executive functioning skills. I wasn't organized. Time management, while I understood time and understood management, time plus management didn't equal time management for me. So I would kind of lazily get through activities at the last minute. They taught me how to be organized. They gave me, an assignment notebook, which like to this day I still carry with me. I still carry an assignment notebook to organize all of my duties. They taught me about the importance of elevating my voice. I'm relatively a quiet, introverted person that's reserved to self. Man, I could be a little more boisterous when I'm around people, but generally I like to kind of be on the low. They really helped me to initiate my voice by doing all these town meetings and presentations. I hated all these things. They taught me these skills. They also, at City on the Hill, taught me the importance of internalizing the skills I learned in fourth and fifth grade, being the beholder of my education experience. In fourth grade, fifth grade, like I mentioned before, it's really external. It became internal in high school where I began to have a desire where like I really enjoyed learning again. And I didn't enjoy it for a while. I just was doing it, but I wasn't enjoying it. High school taught me about how to bring joy into learning. And that was like really the key for me as a student growing up, watching teachers like my favorite Miss Ashraf, who taught chemistry, Mr. Dawson, that taught US history and taught AP government politics, Miss Barry teaching me AP calculus, Miss Pratt teaching me, civics. Like these educators gave the platform for me to to be myself while also becoming a owner, a stakeholder of my own learning. And it was at City on Hill, I learned about this phrase that you are the CEO of your learning. And it's something I always use now with my students. Like you are the CEO of your learning. You are the chief executive officer. It starts and ends with you. And this is your first real investments in learning. I didn't know that till I was like 15, 16 years old, going through high school. I try to share that now with young folks, much younger than I was, when they get that introduction, because school is very important. It is the quintessential element to get you prepared for engagement as in civic engagement, as an informed citizen, a critical consumer of knowledge out in the world. And we need to have that understanding early in the game so we know what our skills are and we can effectively improve our skills moving forward as well. So I guess to answer your question, it took a while for me to really identify school as that space for me where I could really excel. But it was the intrinsic understanding in high school that I am the owner of learning that shifted me from now carrying that forward even to this day in time.
So, when did you first realize you wanted to become a teacher?
Well, I had I've had some interesting relationships with becoming a teacher. I would say very early in life, because my grandma taught me how to read. I was always admired by this element of teaching or helping people to be able to read as well. So that was always a turn on all throughout my life. But I would say that I kind of wavered up and down through the years of schooling. Part of this because my own immaturity, part of it because I was interested in other topics like being a lawyer, being a business person, things like that. I would say that really the first time that really resonated with me that teaching is something that I can really start to really focus on was in high school. I used to run like a tutoring block every single day after school at City on the Hill, where we would meet up, from like 3 to like 5:30. I'll meet up with students and I'll support them with their homework, walk through different math problems, reading assignments, things like that. Really enjoyed that. And students actually would come to these tutoring sessions, which was made even fun. And I'm like, oh yeah, this is really fun. The second, and I think the most influential thing that I normally talk about with people though, is my experience in college with an AmeriCorps program called Jumpstart.
Mhm.
Now, Jumpstart back in 2009, when I was a freshman in college, was servicing 3 to 5 year old children how to read. And if you remember, grandma at 2, 3 years old taught me how to read.
Mhm.
So we talk about full circle moments. This was a full circle moment. I was able to teach young children the direct, explicit instruction of literacy, phonics, phonemic awareness, rhyming awareness, letter sounds, blending, decoding, all these different things. I was teaching and working with young children at that age range how to be a lifelong reader. And I love this so much. I'm like, man, this is what I have to do is to become a teacher. I got to do this now. But when you're 18 and 19, Brother King, you're impressionable and you can fall gullible to the surrounding environment.
Mhm.
So the environment was like, well, why would you want to become a teacher, man? You can, use your math skills to be an accountant, do finance, do something like that. And I'm like, yeah, you know what? That makes sense. Why would I go be a teacher and not make a whole lot of money when I could make a whole lot of money running a business or being part of an accounting firm or something like that? So I was swayed again away from teaching, and this time focus my duty specifically on um, accounting and finance, and started to work at a Big Four accounting firm after I graduated with my undergrad in 2013 with an accounting finance degree, and I worked there for a few years, and I didn't like it. I didn't like getting up at 5 in the morning, getting to work at 7 a.m. and working until 11 p.m. every single day during busy season, losing summers, losing winters, doing taxes for people that I never will meet, for groups of people that was never interacting with. I felt that disconnection and it got me to a really low state about what my call of action is. And another program called Junior Achievement,
Yep.
which teaches all about financial literacy to young folks,
Mhm.
resurface what my calling is to teach. From there, I dropped my work over at the accounting firm, went back to UMass Boston to get the elementary secondary education, started teaching, and been in education ever since. It's the greatest profession in the world. And no one could really tell me a job is better than teaching. You get to make a monumental impact to generations worth of people. And I think that is probably the most joyful, most fun part of it all is that work right there. So yeah, I would say all of that has been really impactful to the ebbs and flows, the waves of flirting with teaching, but never committing to the relationship with teaching until was in rock bottom and really had to find myself to know this is the calling that God had for me to do from the very beginning. It was now time for me to act on
So, how did your upbringing influence your approach to leadership and advocacy?
it. I think the early years I had a chance to see people like my mother, for example, be a strong advocate for me in terms of the type of school I was going to go to and the type of education I was going to receive. I had a great vision of that very early and often from her as part of my educational experience. I also had a chance to see in my own schooling experience teachers vouching for me in terms of giving me access to courses like honors and AP courses, which otherwise didn't have those access to. I was able to get those access because of teacher support. Notice the language I'm using is that either I was a passive bystander or someone else did for me. So it took a long time, I think, for me to find my voice. I would say I probably didn't find my voice until I went to Vanderbilt University for my doctoral degree. I'll be dead honest with you.
Mhm.
Up to that point, yeah, I had a voice. I'm using it right now as we speak. Um, like I was able to be like influential and able to be motivating to young folks and to older folks and things like that. But when we talk about things like advocacy, when we talk about things like justice, equity, things like that, I would say I either was underdeveloped, so I shied away from it, or again, going back to old habits, a passive observer of these moments where I should have said something, but I stayed back and I watched. And when I went to Vanderbilt University in 2022, it was the first place that I would say that now, as a mature 30-year-old student who's now found what his purpose is in life, now is starting to find his voice, I was able to practice my voice there. I was able to try different things, be around a strong cohort of principals, superintendents, educational leaders of all different types to be able to guide me and direct me of like how to be more effective with my voice. Professors who cared about my growth and development, supporting me in developing that skill of being an advocate, not being afraid of the moment, but rising to the moment. It was always in me, but the difference was that I didn't activate that. In part because I didn't seek opportunities to activate it, and other times the opportunities came, I passed on it. Vanderbilt University gave the platform for me to practice all the things I saw my mom do, all the things my teachers have done for me. I had a chance to practice. And that 3 years of practicing turned out to be like very effective for me when I walked away and graduated last May. That was like the moment where it all really just came together for me as an advocate. And now like I lean into advocacy, Brother King, in a way that I think about what our needs of our students are. I think about what's going on in this world when it comes to reading, when it comes to financial literacy, when it comes to all of these elements of schooling and what the schooling experience is. Something has to be done. And I'm put on earth to help make forward these concerns where we have 100% of our young children reading. We have 100% of our children being financially fluent. Where we have kids and we have, young adults who can make wise decisions because they are sound academically and sound streets sound. All of those things are literacy. When you do the street smarts, there's a literacy component for being in the streets and having street smarts in the streets. That's literacy. And it's also literacy to pick up a book and read and to write and to speak and to listen. That's literacy. And combining all that, like that fire got put in me,
Mhm.
and now we're letting that thing go wherever it needs to in order to make sure all of our children have what they need. So Vanderbilt University, thank you, because that was the place where practice was able to become progress.
So when you think about your time at Vanderbilt, you
Mhm.
working on your PhD.
Mhm.
What was the one thing that stood out most to you that you got from being around so many other great people like yourself?
Well, I think the biggest thing that I got out was that Vanderbilt's in Nashville, Tennessee. I'm a Boston kid by nature. So I'm from Boston, Mass. And, when it was time to go to my doctorate program, it just made sense to me that I would look for something in the Boston area, Harvard, something like that. And I stumbled upon Vanderbilt University. I saw like a little, like literally like a stumble upon app. And I clicked on the link and it brought me to Vanderbilt University. And I watched this video and I was just drawn by the video of these students literally flying in from wherever they came from, run into class after they got out of the airport, have their notes, all these different things, their readings, talking about it, debating it, professors, having these conversations with students. And I'm like, oh, that's the place I want to go to,
Right,
something like that.
right.
So I would say Vanderbilt's biggest benefit for me or biggest support for me was that one, it took me out of the confines of Boston. It brought me to another part of the country, another part of culture that's totally different from Boston. Nashville and Boston ain't the same at all. So these are different vibes, different environments you go into. I'm from, in Boston, you don't say what's up to people. You say what's
Right,
up to people, that's a problem.
right,
And Nashville, you have small conversations with people. Y'all talk, the hospitality's there, and it's like you learn these cultural things. But then also, I'm now going to school and the lens is not about Boston or Massachusetts. It's about education.
uh,
Because now I'm going to school, I'm talking with people from Illinois, I'm talking to people from Indiana, I'm talking to people from New York and New Jersey, California, and from Alabama and all these different places, and from Tennessee and all these different places. We're all coming together for these cohort weekends. I'm learning about education in ways that I would have never been exposed to before because different states have different things going on with education. We might all have a similar story, but the law and legislation and how legislation may be able to say one thing in one state and everyone has to follow, but then in another state you try to do that and there might be 300 different districts that might say we're going to do it this way. So you're learning the complexities of education, yet learning that the same goal for everybody is there. That at the age of 18, we want to make sure that our young children are able to be lifelong readers, lifelong writers, be literate, be able to be upstanding citizens in society, civically engaged, informed consumers of knowledge. All these things was like kind of a universal understanding. How we got there was the wrestling question. I spent 3 years wrestling at Vanderbilt University. I would say I couldn't get that anywhere else because I don't know if I would have had all these people from all these different places coming to one spot. And more importantly, for me personally, to leave out of the nest and to go
mhm,
fly somewhere else, literally on a plane every weekend to Nashville, taught me a lot about who I am and some of my cultural values that I now take into heart today, because now Nashville is a second home, Vanderbilt's a second home. Love Vanderbilt, and that experience to find myself literally in my voice and my leadership and my command and authority as an educator. That I don't know if happens the same way if I stayed home. I had to go. I had to go away and go do that.
Well, let's transition over to your work as an educator.
Yeah.
Um, so, what philosophy guided your 9 years as an elementary school teacher?
Repeat the question one more time. I'm sorry.
What philosophy guided your 9 years as an elementary school teacher?
Well, there's a couple of philosophies, and I didn't know these philosophies until much later. But the philosophy that I think I can really share with the listening audience and the viewing audience tonight of how I approach teaching and learning is the crazy framework. I mentioned to you all before that my first year was not a good year. I was dealing with crazy situations and I didn't know how to handle them. And I needed guidance on how to handle them. As a teacher, I learned through the mentoring and development of other Black male educators and other teachers who cared about me being effective about this crazy framework. And I'll walk you through what the crazy framework is and tell you what they all mean and how that impacts my philosophy as a teacher. So the letter C, in crazy stands for cultivating connections. Before anything happens in the classroom, it's so important for teachers to be able to know their students. When I say know their students, not just like knowing their name. Like you get to walk in a path with them for an entire year. And during the course of that year, you're sharing a story together. So successes and wins, you get to celebrate together. Losses and defeats, you get to mourn about them. And everything in the in between, you get to experience. I get a chance to write a page out of those children's books every year. And those pages just my preparation for them to get ready for their calling and service in life. I have to cultivate those connections because I need to know who you are, your interests. I need to know like what you're called to be, what your talents are, what your gifts are that God gave you. And then how do I help to cultivate those things in the year that I get to serve with you? R is respect and routines. We cultivate a community of respect where we all are one. I am because we are, that Ubuntu kind of statement. I am because we are. We are together as one because we have this opportunity where we're learning from each other, we're learning with each other, and none of us are better than one another. We just are utilizing all of our gifts to make the best versions of ourselves. And in the midst of that, we establish routines of how to get up out of our seats, how to walk to the rug space, how to engage in popcorn style discussions where kids can shout out answers, but listening to each other and bouncing off ideas from each other. So critical. The A stands for activating student voice. So we talked earlier that I did a lot of this in my first year teaching, talked a lot. But in fact, my goal now is to elevate the student voices to increase, but my voice decreases over the course of the year. I want to make it where it's about 80-20, 80% student voice, 20% my voice. Why? Because students actually learn best when they use the language amongst each other in the classroom. If they're just getting all this information from me, it might look great. I could probably get through a good evaluation. Maybe I could dumb stuff from my principal. But long term, students have less likely to remember all the things that we talked about if they only hear from me. But if they take notes, if they have anchor charts in the classroom, if they're talking with each other, if they're working in groups, heterogeneous groups where they have different skill sets, now all of a sudden they're activating different skills that's more related to who they are and learning from other skill sets from other students enriches the learning experience. This Z like zebra, where I zoom into the learning. This is what we call zooming in. This is looking at data. This is what's informing my teaching and instructional practice. This is what's helping me to know what students need, but also how do I support them? So if I'm teaching fourth grade, for example, and I got 20 students that's reading on grade level, and I got a student who's reading at first grade level, it's my duty to zoom in to see what skills that student has well, where is the student developing their skills, and then how do I intervene by having smaller group reading structure with that student or students to build their reading skills up so that way they can make progress. And finally, the why is yielding towards achievement. We want to yield towards achievement. Um, I believe at the end of the day, as a teacher, I failed my students if we're less than 100% achievement at the end of the school year, whether it's a universal screener, state assessment. All my students need to be able to showcase achievement. And what I mean by achievement is that if I'm teaching fourth grade, they've met all of the Massachusetts fourth grade standards for each of the subject areas, reading, writing, math, etc. And they're able to showcase that through multiple modalities. They can take an assessment and pass it. They could lead a presentation and be effective speakers during the presentation. They can go and do like a almost like a science fair like display and showcase their learning. They have a portfolio. I want to showcase multiple avenues in which students are able to showcase they've mastered the content area and that they're more than prepared for the next step. So that philosophy of dealing with crazy situations with crazy, if you will, this crazy framework helps to organize. I know it's like oxymoron, right? Organize the classroom to where everything that we do is intentional. Every move that we make is to further advance student learning. And every move that we make is to further along the achievement process. If a student walks into my room on day one, by day 180, with the implementation of the crazy framework and my prowess as a teacher, they should be able to walk away with at least a grade level, if not more than a grade level of achievement over the course of that year because they've been stretched and we're intrinsically building up students to take ownership of their learning. That's the goal. They become intrinsic motivators of their own learning.
We have a comment here in the chat from Mr. Frederick Cooper. I'll put it on the screen. He says, "Nice show."
Oh, thank you, French. Appreciate that.
Yes, sir. So, can you tell us how did you cultivate resilience and collaboration in your classroom?
Oh, I got a good story for you on that. So, cultivating resilience. So, oh man, this was a few years ago. I just moved school districts. I went from Boston to Lexington, and they're totally different communities. Boston is, it's a urban school district. It's the largest school district in Massachusetts. It's, black, brown, you name it. It's what a lot of the metropolitan type of areas will look like. Great school district. I went to Lexington, which is a suburban school district. Um, Night and day, they got a lot of resources there, a lot of money to play with, smaller schools, all these different things. So it looks different. Um, but the teaching doesn't change, because as a black male educator, no matter who you put in front of me, those kids are going to get better. They're going to achieve. And that's data. Data says that. So, that's research. So anyway, I'm in my first full year in Lexington. And I decided, with my third graders, I was teaching third grade at the time. I said, you know what? We was practicing how to transition in the hallway.
Mhm.
These third graders learn how to walk in the hallway, get from, classroom to the cafeteria for lunch, all these different things. And I set this challenge. I asked if the kids wanted to do this challenge. They were like, yeah. This challenge was that they were going to learn how to transition themselves all throughout the school day. They was going to learn how to get from one place to another without teacher support all throughout the day. Now, that school year had 28 students, and it was let's say, it was not a peaceful class. It was certainly one with a lot of action going on. So this was going to be a challenge. But I said, you know what? Let's do it. So I trained them for about 3 weeks, giving them feedback, all these different things. And then at the third week, and talking about this cultivating resiliency, I said to them like, all right, y'all, what we're going to do, change makers, is that we're going to now begin for you to transition yourself throughout the course of your school day. And they were excited, but they also knew the responsibility because we've been talking about this for 3 weeks. We've been building this up for 3 weeks. And man, these kids, they were doing it up right. I tell you, there was traffic going on in the hallways. They would stop and let another class pass by, all these different things like that. They were doing their thing. And then, they will transition themselves back to the room, and like it was like quiet as a mouse. They would get back in the room, get back to their seat, and start working on activities. If I had activities out for them to work on, whole nine, things were going well. It was so good even that a fifth grade class actually saw my third grade class transition themselves. They're like, yo, how come we don't get to do that? And the kids were like to them, we'll teach you. And they went up to that fifth grade class, taught the fifth graders how to do it. They started doing it. So the resiliency comes in when I got this email. Because and there's always a little bit of like resistance to this type of radical movement. I got this long. It was like that classic 11 o'clock email too. This the 11 o'clock email. This is right before you go to bed. You foolishly take the look at the email one last time, and there it is. And essentially said that it is unwise for teachers to have their kids walk around the school building by themselves. And they gave all these lists about why you should not do this. So in cultivating that resiliency, we made a proposal about why what we're doing is actually appropriate for third grade students. We explained, me and the class, we explained that one, kids are actually starting to prepare for life. In life, you're not going to have somebody hold your hand and walk you from one place to another. You're going to learn that in middle school, for example, in just a couple of years, there is no teacher holding your hand to class. You better know how to get there. So we're teaching our upper elementary students up front how to prepare and how to get ready for an experience that won't surprise them when it's time to do it. They already know how to do it because they practice. Number two, this is where I got a lot of teachers on my side. I said, have you ever thought about why you don't have your full planning time? Like imagine if you had another 5 minutes of planning time every day. Do make some copies, maybe go to the bathroom, because as a teacher, going to the bathroom is a luxury item. You may not be able to go to the bathroom for 3 hours at a time. Imagine you just had that opportunity to go to the bathroom, or you're able to finish that conversation with a family that has a concern about a student learning. Now you have those few extra minutes to work on that. And I ran the numbers. I said, you can actually gain a whole school day's worth of planning time if we actually did this with third through fifth grade students. If we did this transition with kids, practice responsible transitions, we actually gain a day of planning time over the course of the year. Why would we not want to do that?
Right.
That turned a lot of people on to this idea of cultivating that type of resiliency where there was pushback, but then follow that pushback was, wait a minute, I have data and I have research to showcase my students are responsible when they transition. So there's no reason for them to stop. By the way, if you train your students how to do it, or if you have my class come to your class to teach them how to do it, you get a benefit as well because you get more playing time. So in cultivating resiliency and cultivating this idea of of perseverance and change making, if you will, there's always going to be some sort of resistance behind it. The idea is that when resistance takes place, we must be able to have the data, the evidence, and then the analysis as to why what we're doing is transformative and not be afraid of the resistance that come along with it. Now, before I pass it back to you, I want to give this caveat because I think it's important depending upon who's the listening audience. You might have teachers who might be in their first year and their second year, like, damn, that sounds like a really dope idea. I want to try that. I would caution people to also understand that seniority is important when we think about what cultivating resiliency is. And so there are levels to the game that we have to play in this political environment of education. A first year teacher needs to have or early career educator really needs to have the communal support to engage in these types of radical movements. Someone who is like brand new to trying something out like that when they haven't had their own classroom organized yet, is probably not a wise move to me. So I would say that, before just going right into it, like, yeah, I'm about to go do this, caution the listening viewer to know that there is levels to the game. And you have to know what is the levels of advocacy that I can do, but what is also the professional development I need to do in order to be first effective in my own classroom space before concerning myself with the outer environment. One of my principals once said to me, I don't want you involved in any sort of committee work until year 3. Your first 2 years need to be focused on how to be an effective teacher. And that's something I pass along to my teachers as well today. The first couple of years needs to be focused on your classroom and how to elevate your classroom to be a sanctuary of knowledge and wisdom, a sanctuary of conversation and of radical liberation, of freedom and joyful learning. Then, when you have the classrooms thing down, that's when you can start thinking about some of these other things that you might be trying to try out to do. But we got to make sure the home base is cleared first. The Bible actually tells us you can't go out and do ministry out in the world if your home ain't set. So the home base got to be set first. And then we can start worrying about all this stuff afterwards.
Mhm. Let me tell you, again, I have to say, again, this is another a fascinating moment here in education because, as I said, the educators that have been on the show before, everybody is doing something that's making a difference and an impact at the schools that they're at. Now, when it comes to that new district, are you still in that same district?
No, so after I became teacher of the year in 2024, my schedule, let's just say, got a little crazy. Um, to say the least, I was pulled out of the classroom almost every week and doing some sort of speaking engagement or some sort of guest appearance. My last 2 years of teaching, I missed 45 days each of those last 2 years. That's a lot of school days for a teacher to miss, especially when they're establishing their own brand and they're also elevating their voice now as a national figure when it comes to public speaking, keynote speaking, professional development, all these different things. They clash with each other. So I wasn't able to stay in Lexington mainly because I had to make that choice of it's time to elevate this impact work of cultivating change makers to another level. And rather than just focusing on the 25 in front of me, I can focus on the millions and the 25 in front of me when it comes to making sure that education and impact is met for every one of my students. So yeah, I had to do that tight shift, but that actually have led to me to make a greater impact as a result. Even if the seat shifted from being a classroom teacher to an educational advocate and an educational change maker, if you will. The seat shifted, the impact has continued.
So, what strategies help
Yeah.
you build interdependent learning communities?
So we could talk about that. We could talk about that in two ways. Um, interdependency interdependence is a term that you don't use as much as dependent or independent. And it's this middle ground that sometimes get lost. Interdependence means, in its kind of rawest form, that there is not this layer of like my hands being held by my teacher, but it's also that I'm not fully independent. I need guided practice. This is guided practice.
Mhm.
And guided practice incorporates teacher, students, and learner community. We have things like the teacher who is a resource, not the resource, a resource for students to use. Students are a resource for students to use because you can ask them questions, you can bounce ideas off each other, you can wrestle with ideas, agree, disagree, all these different things. Notes, anchor charts is also a resource that you can use because sometimes you're working on a math problem and like, I don't know what strategy I should use. Well, look at that anchor chart over there. You got 5 of them. You could select one that might be beneficial for you for this problem. And still, there's also this note taking element where we get to wrestle with ideas together in the big rug space and bounce off ideas, questions, answers, things like that. So, from an interdependency standpoint, it means that we're constantly guiding one another towards the destination, which is achievement. And rather it than being a teacher centric thing, it's a warm demander thing. The teacher and the students are all demanding excellence while also guiding with love towards excellence. And it's those moments right there for students and for classroom teachers as well that makes classrooms special. It makes teaching and learning special. Interdependence now as a founder of Cultivating Changemakers looks a little bit different. So now in my work today, I do a couple different things. One is that I help to create financial literacy curriculum and financial literacy content to students and to schools and to communities all around that's looking for knowledge and wisdom on financial literacy. I can't do this work by myself. I need guided direction. That guided direction is coalitions, it's advocacy groups, it's communal support with my team that helps to see different vantage points of academic learning in a way that is enriching and empowering while also being able to be a source of idea generation amongst each other. Interdependency in the business in the educational business world is a coalition. When we all have the same mission, same goal, but we have different vantage points of how to reach those goals. So, for example, in Massachusetts, we are one of 10 states that does not have a state mandate financial literacy curriculum at this time. So students do not take financial literacy courses as a required class in Massachusetts. And over 90% of our students are currently not accessing financial literacy.
Mm,
So that's a problem. That means that kids are graduating, never talking about money. They graduated, never talking about checking accounts, savings accounts, investments, entrepreneurship, and what does that mean from a financial standpoint? Those conversations are not being had. Part of that's because there hasn't been a requirement. So why teach it when there's no